question. I've never. Quickly scream at me like, no.
It's like really cool.
Like 7 foot.
Yeah, exactly. Talking about having
welcome to Southampton. The sun has come out, the leader of the Labour Party is here, and all is well with the world. We are campaigning in Southampton for the investment that people need. Investment in their lives, investment in the public services they depend on, and investment in the infrastructure that this city needs to take it forward into the next century. The investment in health. We cannot carry on with a situation in Southampton where people are waiting weeks for an appointment with their GP. We cannot carry on with a situation where there is no effective out-of-hours service for anybody on the east of the city. Investment in education. It's one of the things that I achieved as leader of the council was to keep every single Sure Start centre in this city open and operating and given a service to the families that need it. But we need investment in our schools, some of which are desperate for more resources so they can do the best job they can for the children and families that we care about. We need investment in the whole population, as in our National Education Service proposals, so people are not left behind and they're retrained and given fresh opportunities when the job they're in comes to an end. We need investment in housing. We cannot carry on as a city or a country with homeless people on the streets of our city. We need to take action across public services to invest in them, in mental health services, in services around addiction, and of course in the provision of decent social homes for the people of the city. We stand ready here in Southampton as a Labour Council to build those homes. That our fair share, and we've done a little calculation, is 4,000 new council homes for Southampton, which will do a big thing in giving people a secure home to live in and a decent place to build a life around. We need investment, of course, in climate change. And I'll put that in three categories. Not only do we need to invest in people's homes, insulation, solar panels, ground source heat pumps, but we need to invest in the environment. We need to invest in those magic machines that suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. We need to build up lots of more trees, plant over 1 billion trees in this country, and we as a city stand ready to take our part in that. And we need investment in our infrastructure. Anybody can look out the windows behind us, can see how high the tide is today. Unless we build flood defences for this part of the city, and we build them soon, this stadium may be underwater next time you visit it. And of course, this stadium is at the centre of Southampton life. The football club is part of our community. And another institution that we love, certainly in the Labour Party in the city, is of course Jenny Formby, who's been here for well over 30 years, fighting for decent rights and opportunities for working people. And as a trade union activist, a trade union full-time officer, we know that Jenny is on the side of the people of the city. And I'm delighted to bring her to the platform to welcome, to say a few words and introduce our principal speaker. Thank you.
Simon, for that introduction. As he says, we've known each other for over 30 years, and there couldn't be a better person to win this seat from Royston Smith, who's had the dubious award. He's had the dubious honour of being awarded the accolade of Britain's laziest MP. So bring it on, and let's get Simon into number 10. And it's fantastic to be here in number 10. Sorry, Jeremy. In Westminster. In Westminster. Anyway, look, it's fantastic to be here in my hometown of Southampton. And before I welcome Jeremy to the stage, I just want to thank all of you, our members, our foot soldiers, our activists, for everything you're doing in this campaign. With it being increasingly difficult for us to get our message across in the media, you are our voice, whether it's on the doorstep or whether it's on social media, whether it's in the workplace. And I'm incredibly grateful. We're a truly people-powered campaign, and you're the people who are building that campaign from the ground up. So thank you all very much. But moving on to why we're here today, Britain's green industrial revolution is obviously massively important for the future of our country, for the environment, for our economy, for jobs. So it gives me huge pleasure, and it's a massive honour for me to be here today to introduce the most decent, honest and inclusive man that I know, the next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thanks for being here today. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for all being here this morning, and I'm sorry if we're slightly late starting. We were in Falmouth last night and we stayed in Exeter and then came here this morning, and I have to say I just love Dorset, travelling through it. It's an utterly beautiful place, and I've always enjoyed cycling through it as well. And can I also say a big thank you to Southampton Football Club for giving us the space this morning. And as an Arsenal supporter, all the best and good luck. But just remember, when you play Arsenal, should we just settle for a draw and be done with it? So thanks very much for that. And also, thank you very much to all of you for being here today. All of you that have worked so hard on Extinction Rebellion, and all of you that have educated a whole population and a whole generation, and indeed on a world scale educated the whole world, that we cannot just be any longer complacent about issues facing the environment. And that's mainly what I want to talk about this morning. I also want to thank Simon for what he just said, because he is somebody that loves, knows, understands and will be a brilliant representative of this city in Parliament, because he's totally grounded in it. And when he says 4,000 council houses for Southampton, that's exactly what has to be done. We cannot go on with the housing crisis there is at the present time. And that is what a Labour government will do. And also I want to say a huge thank you to Jenny Formby. As you know, she's been through hell and high water in a terrible place. Anyone going through cancer is going through a difficult place. But it's a measure of Jenny that 2 weeks ago she was phoning me. She said, "Ring me quickly, please," texted me, and I said, "Of course," and I rang her straight away. She was concerned about somebody else going through cancer and wanted me to send a message to them to wish them well. That's a measure of what Jenny Formby is about. Fantastic sense of loyalty to friends and comrades. Jenny, thank you for everything you do. And you're looking great. Now, it would be remiss of me to begin without saying a few words about President Trump and his friend Boris Johnson. Because the Conservatives have been caught trying to cover things up. Yesterday, Labour exposed the secret plot to sell out our National Health Service as part of a toxic deal with Donald Trump. I revealed uncensored reports of far-reaching talks between US and UK officials about breaking open our National Health Service to United States corporations, and of driving up the cost of medicines that the NHS has to pay. Those revelations absolutely shredded all of Boris Johnson's denials that the NHS was on the table in talks with Donald Trump and his administration. I called for the Prime Minister to come clean. What did he do? He doubled down. But the documents reveal what's in store under a Johnson government. He won't get Brexit done. That claim is actually a fraud on the people of this country. Instead, what he will do is plunge us into more years of painful negotiations and broken promises, whilst we are spectators watching our most precious institution, our National Health Service, get carved up and sold off before our very eyes. This election is now a fight for the survival of our NHS as a public service. public service that we are proud of, that puts patients before profits, that treats people irrespective who they are, what income they have or anything else. A health service free at the point of need. So, you can vote Conservative to sell out our NHS or vote Labour to save our NHS. The choice is very clear. We will never let Donald Trump get his hands on our National Health Service because our NHS is not for sale. But the Trump deal plot is not only a threat to our health service, it's a threat to our environment too. The 451 pages of leaked text that I held up in front of the cameras show United States negotiators complaining, yes, about our controls on pesticides. They even attacked our basic rules on consumer labelling, including for controversial genetically modified crops. But one thing the US government is absolutely refuses to have any discussions about is the climate crisis. US officials are, and I quote, emphatic that they will, and I quote, not include mention of greenhouse gas reductions in trade agreements, close quotes, because climate change is, they say, quotes, very sensitive in the United States. Well, I don't care how sensitive it is. This is the biggest threat to our future. There could scarcely be more of a contrast between the complacency and denial of Trump and Johnson and the urgency of the younger generation whose future is at stake. I've been deeply moved to see school children taking part in protests in the streets about climate breakdown, and I'm pleased that we have some of the climate strikers here with us today. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for all that you do. For someone of my generation, it's inspiring because as somebody who's been active in environmental causes ever since I was at school, always being treated and told that it was a bit of a side issue, a bit not important, not central, and it's humbling that seeing children now teaching adults a lesson. It's as though all those activists of all those years, from Rachel Carson in the United States and many others all around the world, the whole thing has gone full circle and it's now absolutely a mainstream part of political debate and discourse. Thank you for everything you do. And I'm proud that Labour has responded, leading the British Parliament to become the first in the world to declare a climate and environment emergency, because we can see the effects of the emergency all around us. Recent floodings in Yorkshire and East Midlands have tragically brought that home with the death of Annie Hall. A Labour government will invest in flood defences, especially in areas like the North West Yorkshire and the East Midlands that have been shamefully neglected by the Tories. But we will also be investing in river management, upstream management and floodplains as well. It's not just about flood defences, it's about our attitude and our relationship with the environment. The reality is, this election is our last chance to tackle the climate and environment emergency. So today, I want to set out Labour's plan for real change, to protect our planet and restore our natural world. We have no time to waste. David Attenborough said it earlier this year. We now stand at a unique point in our planet's history where we must all share responsibility for the future of life on Earth. We have a choice. We can shut our eyes, cross our fingers, entrust our fate to the system that has already driven our planet to the brink of catastrophe. Or we can do everything possible to tackle the biggest threat that we face. This means taking on the big polluters who profit from the current system. If we flinch, then we'll be handing down a broken planet to our children and their children. Bringing our carbon emissions down to net zero won't happen by itself. It will only be possible with massive public investment in renewable energy and green technology. So a Labour government will bring about a green industrial revolution, creating 1 million new skilled green jobs. 1 million jobs, from building wind turbines to insulating homes to reforesting our wonderful countryside, to manufacturing new electric vehicles. Here in Southampton, you've benefited from geothermal power, which has brought jobs and investment to the city. We need more of that kind of innovation across the country. Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government wiped out whole swathes of British industry in the 1980s. And Boris Johnson's Conservatives are continuing that damaging legacy. We will rebuild industry, but it will be as the green cutting-edge industry of the future. Places whose identity and pride was steeped in the skills of those who lived there will thrive once more. Our green industrial revolution will benefit working-class communities with more rewarding, well-paid, cheaper energy bills for everyone and new opportunities in parts of our country that have been held back for far too long. Because too often people are made to feel like the cost of saving the planet falls on them, while the wealthy can fly about in private jets and heat their empty mansions. Well, we're going to change that. But it's not only about cutting down the amount of carbon we're pumping into the atmosphere. It's also about protecting our natural world and creating the conditions for it to flourish. So today, we're publishing Labour's Plan for Nature. And as the centrepiece of that plan, we have a very exciting announcement. A Labour government will create 10 brand new national parks. Increasing the total size of our national parks by 50%, meaning 3/4 of the people of this country will live within 30 minutes of a national park. We'll consult widely on the exact locations of the parks, but there are some obvious candidates. The Cotswolds, the beautiful Cotswolds, the Chiltern Hills, the North and South Pennines, coastal Suffolk, coastal Dorset, I'm sure you'll be pleased about that one, and the Lincolnshire Wolds. A new authority will be tasked with ensuring the parks help tackle the climate crisis and restore nature and biodiversity in them. But they will also be there for leisure and for the beauty that they are. It was the post-war Labour government that created the first national parks in the wake of World War II. It was part of a radical plan to open up the best of our country for everyone, from literally all walks of life. That's the spirit that a Labour government will take forward as we create 10 more parks, giving people access to the green spaces that are so vital for our well-being and our mental health. Our country is in many ways defined by its beautiful landscapes, its rolling hills, rugged coastlines and idyllic woodlands. I travel around Britain all the time by train, and I'm in awe of the beauty that I see right here at home. I want to protect that landscape, which is so precious to us all. At the Labour Party conference, we always finish by singing the wonderful words of William Blake, vowing to build a new Jerusalem in Britain's green and pleasant land. We've got to change the words. That's our commitment, and we can achieve that together. The 10 new national parks will be the heart of a much bigger network of protected areas, joined up by nature-friendly corridors of hedgerows, pathways and canals. Because if you don't have that connectivity between woodlands, then mammals can't migrate and you end up with a reduction in the strength of the natural population of animals, birds and insects. So it's quite important to have that connectivity. And some councils have done that very well, and I compliment Stevenage Council on creating nature corridors all across a new town. It's to their credit. But that's not all we'll do, because a Labour government will set a target to plant 2 billion trees by 2040. starting with 300 million in our first term. We'll plant trees in the national parks. We'll plant them in the national forests, which will extend to Sherwood Forest. We'll plant 1 million new trees on land owned by the National Health Service, which will be a National Health Service forest. And we'll work with communities to plant trees in towns and cities too. These will be mixed native species, creating wildlife-rich woodlands. There will not be one species alone. And we'll stop paying farm subsidies to billionaires and instead create a fund to plant organic fruit orchards producing local food, thus reducing food miles and distances for fresh fruit to be taken to where it's sold and consumed. We'll expand and restore our habitats and plant trees so that we can create natural solutions to bring down emissions and allow our wildlife to flourish. Because currently, wildlife is in crisis. In 1970, when I was active doing stuff for the Worldwide Fund for Nature, then WWF, the turtle dove population was strong. It's declined in that time by 97%. Animals that are part of our national culture are declining at a frightening rate. The hedgehog almost disappeared from many parts of the country. The natterjack toad, the red squirrel, unknown in many parts of the country. Many children have never seen a natterjack toad or a red squirrel or heard the song of many birds. The cuckoo is something that many children never ever hear. Once these species disappear, they don't come back. So we'll take specific steps to protect and restore their populations. And on animal welfare, we will ban fur and end the use of cruel snares and halt the badger cull. And unlike the Conservatives, you can trust that Labour will never, ever allow fox hunting to return to this country. We know from the uncensored version of the Trump trade documents that the US is pushing the UK to accept chlorinated chicken on our dinner tables. And the US wants to roll back our laws protecting animals too. As the party of animal welfare, Labour will never accept that. In parts of our country, the air we breathe is frankly poisoning us. Air pollution contributes to more than 40,000 deaths a year. Think of that figure, 40,000 deaths a year. Children living in inner city areas adjacent to major roads can have their lung capacity reduced by up to 10% due to air pollution. That's before they even start school. And that damages their whole life chances. Imagine a child loses 10% of their lung capacity, and that's going to be with them for the rest of their lives, and the lives will probably be shorter as a result of that. It simply cannot be right. Children shouldn't have to pay with their health for the failure of politicians to tackle this problem. So we will introduce a new Clean Air Act, encouraging cleaner transport and clean air zones around all of our children's schools. We're living in the jaws of a climate and environment emergency. We cannot afford more wasted years of Conservative inaction from a government bought and paid for by the big polluters and the billionaires. Labour is on your side and on the side of the environment. I don't apologise. Our plan for nature is radical and innovative, and I think it begins to measure up to the emergency that we all face. And it's just a part of the green transformation of our economy and society that a Labour government will bring about. The future is ours to make, provided we act now. Together, we can change course and leave for the next generation a country and a planet that's fit for them. It's time for real change. Thank you very much. Before we take questions, this is the, it's come from the photocopier. This is a plan for nature, our manifesto for the environment. No other party has ever produced anything so comprehensive. A great deal of work has been put into this by a lot of people. Experts who work with us in my office and other offices, experts in many other places, but the real experts, the climate change and other activists around the country. It's an absolutely brilliant, inspiring document. And so I urge you to read it online to reduce the use of paper. Read it online so that we may protect and preserve the planet. But I've printed one off so you can see the beauty of the pictures on the front page. And I also want to thank the Shadow Cabinet team that I appointed to lead us on the Green Industrial Revolution, and that's Sue Heyman, Rebecca Long-Bailey and Barry Gardner and Danny Rowley, who's their spokesperson. They've done an amazing job, and I'm very grateful to all of them for the work they've put in. Lovely picture.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. And you're joining a great tradition of Labour Prime Ministers and leaders who have come to this country, who's come to this city. There must be something on this bench here. We seem to get things wrong. But we've had Clement Attlee, we've had Harold Wilson, we've had Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, who have all come here and campaigned and become Prime Minister. And now we can say Jeremy Corbyn joins that great lineup of Labour leaders. So we're going to take some questions now, but we're short for time, so we'll probably only have time for 3 rounds.
You can watch all this on Debate Tonight on Channel 4 as well.
There we go.
All the party leaders in debate tonight except one. £10 if you guess the right answer. Which one would it be?
So, as you can see, we've got a lot of media and cameras here, so I want to make sure that they get the chance to ask questions about the plan that we put forward, about some of the bold ideas that Jeremy's been talking about earlier. So I'll start with Jonathan Blake from the BBC. Where are you, Jonathan?
No. Listen, please. Hi, Jonathan.
You, Mr Corbyn. Jonathan Blake, BBC News. The environment is clearly a big issue in this election. Brexit is another one. Can I ask you what your message is today to traditional Labour supporters who are considering and maybe preparing to back the Conservatives over Brexit?
OK. Thank you, Jonathan. Let's make sure that we can hear the questions, everybody. So, next question is from Libby Wiener from ITV. Libby?
Sorry. Mr Corbyn, you've got a very ambitious programme of tree planting. You know that Downing Street has a pretty big garden. How many would you plan to plant personally if you do get into number 10? And can I also ask you, we are coming up to Christmas, would you advise people perhaps to forego getting a Christmas tree so fewer trees are cut down?
OK. Thank you, Libby. Diana Magnay from Sky. Diana?
Mr Corbyn, we're hearing that you will be shifting your focus in the north because of a drift from your traditional voters to the Tories. Would you say that that is an admission that your Brexit campaign has failed to convince your traditional base? And also another question, if I may. The IFS have repeated again that your spending plans aren't credible. Why should the public believe them if independent experts don't? Thank you.
OK, thanks for your questions. First of all, the environment is a massive issue. Thank you for that. And obviously Brexit is an issue as well for millions of people all over this country. The two things are not mutually exclusive. I recognise that environmental problems can only be solved by a determination of a national government to deal with it within their own country, but also the work that you do internationally. If you pour poison in the sea, it doesn't stay within your own territorial waters, it goes somewhere else. If you pollute a river, that goes into the sea, and that helps to pollute the whole world ultimately. The plastic island in the Pacific hasn't come from nowhere. It's come from a lot of countries all around the Pacific not regulating their waste. And so we have to work very closely internationally, which is why I'll be very pleased to host COP26 in Britain next year, when we'll improve on the Paris Climate Change Accords and make it even stronger in order to reach net zero. And so working with European countries is very important. Our plans on Brexit are absolutely clear. Within 3 months of taking office, we'll negotiate a leave option with the European Union that maintains trade with the European Union and protects the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland by a customs arrangement, and protects the rights that we've obtained through European membership, consumer rights, environmental protections and workers' rights. And within 6 months, we will put that to a referendum of the British people, in which I, as Prime Minister, would make sure the referendum was fairly held, with very strict rules on credibility of campaigning and funding of campaigning, and the decision would be made by the British people. Because people have got to come together on this. We cannot go on forever debating what happened or didn't happen in 2016, but we have to recognise that in 2016, nobody voted to lose their job. Nobody voted to see their conditions destroyed. And that is a message that I will take out all over the country, and our campaign is in every part of the country. As you know, I said I was in Falmouth yesterday. I'll be in Yorkshire at the weekend, and I'm travelling all around the country. And you know what? I say the same thing at every place I go. I don't have one message for one group and another message for another group. I say the same message everywhere. Vote Labour in order to get a government that will deal with the inequalities and poverty and injustice that austerity has heaped on this country. Vote Labour in order to have a sensible, grown-up approach to the issues of relations with Europe in the future. And vote Labour in order to have a government that's serious about dealing with the biggest issue that's facing the whole planet, that is the climate emergency, and a government that on the world stage will act intelligently on that as well and have trade policies that reflect the environmental crisis that we're all in at the present time. And I'll be very proud to lead that government. On the points you make about tree planting, I am conscious that they are very ambitious plans. And so we expect by 2025 to have managed to plant 300 trees. By 2030 it will be 1 billion. By 2040 we will have reached the figure that I talked about in my speech. That tree planting is a massive undertaking. The land is available. We've discussed this with those that administer the national parks. We've discussed it with many people. The land is available, but obviously there needs to be an expansion of tree nurseries, and there are a great many jobs that will be developed as a result of that. We have the lowest level of tree cover of any European country, and the lowest ever level in Britain was after the First World War when the Forestry Commission was founded, and it hasn't gone up as much as it should have done in that time. And so we will be very, very ambitious on this, and I will of course set an example by planting in the Downing Street garden. Indeed, I've got a very nice hornbeam tree in a pot in my back garden, which I was given by climate extinction people when they demonstrated outside Parliament. I've been looking after it very, very carefully and very, very well, and I can find a really nice place to plant it. it is, of course, about achieving that and the jobs that will be created as a result of it. You mentioned the IFS and its comments. Yes, of course, we've taken on board the IFS comments. This country faces a crisis of injustice and poverty and inequality, and it faces a crisis of lack of investment. I think our manifesto is bold, it's ambitious, it's prepared for, it's thought out, and there's a grey book that fully costs it. No other party has produced a costed manifesto. No other party has put themselves up to that kind of scrutiny. And I'm quite happy to have that kind of scrutiny, as is John McDonnell and others. We are very confident that our manifesto can deliver improvements in the lifestyle and life chances of the very poorest people in our country, and will not result in tax or national insurance increases for anyone earning less than £80,000 per year. Because we believe that the biggest corporations and the wealthiest should pay a little bit more, that we do have a fully funded education service, health service, we do have a housing programme for the future, and we do invest for the future, because there are too many people going through mental health stress because of the way they're forced to work on 0 hours contracts and the insecurity that they face in their lives. And so it is about the holistic approach to things that I'm very proud to put forward in our manifesto.
OK, thank you, Jeremy. OK, so saw James Ingham from BBC South.
Mr Corbyn, you are launching your environment and climate policy in Southampton, a city where the Labour-run council recently backed down on its idea of charging the most polluting vehicles to drive in parts of the city in order to try to reduce the pollution levels here, the very high pollution levels here. Just down the road in Portsmouth, the Lib Dem council is planning to charge the most polluting vehicles to drive in that city. Now, Southampton's, the council here says that it can achieve measures to bring down pollution through other means, but that's only going to just bring them below the kind of current levels that are required. Don't you think that, you said that there's no time to waste, don't you think that the council and other councils around the city should be going further, should be more ambitious in terms of improving air quality and pollution in cities?
We've improved air about 24%. Richard Sleeve from ITV Meridian.
Mr Corbyn, the Dorset coastal area is already very popular with visitors. Won't creating a new national park there simply make a traffic problem and therefore a pollution problem even worse?
OK. And Emily Hudson, BBC Radio Solent.
Mr Corbyn, you have a very marginal seat just across the water there in Itchin. 31 votes you need to win it. Down the road in Portsmouth South, you have a seat where Stephen Morgan's under pressure from both sides and the Brexit Party. How confident are you of breaking through what is really, here in the South, quite a conservative heartland and actually gaining any seats? I mean, you've driven through Dorset. It's as blue as you can get. Can you win down here in the South and actually get yourself into number 10?
Do you want to say anything about the traffic thing, or should I do it?
OK.
You do it, yeah.
I think I should answer the question by James about the clean air zone. So we actually created a Green City Charter, which was a movement of all of the organisations in this city to collectively tackle air pollution. And we've had 76 organisations which has done that, and we have already reduced air pollution in this city by 24%. The government's Clean Air Zone programme was a farce, and it wasn't felt that it was right for this city.
Thanks. And obviously it is about tougher and stricter regulations in the future, but it's also about improving public transport and empowering local authorities to take over and run and own bus services, which will be integrated with rail as well. And I've been all the climate and environment roundtables I've been to all around the country, and I've been to many, nearly all of them focus eventually on issues of public transport and air pollution. In the 1980s, the Conservative government wanted to deregulate bus services across the whole country. Sadly, they achieved it everywhere except one place, and that was London, where they were unable to do it, mainly because we defeated them on it. And London, as a result, has an integrated bus service, much higher levels of bus usage than any other part of the country, and a very efficient service as a result of that. It can be done. But it does mean you've got to get the local decision-making and local infrastructure right to do it. I don't think that can all be done at a national level. It's better done at a local level and integration with it, and that's the empowerment we will give to local authorities, and indeed require them to work closely with the rail service as well for fully integrated transport, because at the end of the day, good public transport revives town and city centres, revives high streets, and also revives the rural economy, as actually does rolling out of broadband for every part of this country means that you can open businesses in small areas of the country that are otherwise left behind. So I take issues of air pollution very, very seriously indeed. After all, I do represent a very densely populated inner city community where these issues are absolutely germane to the very existence of our community. Thank you for your point about the Dorset coastal area. I think it's an incredibly beautiful area. Chesil Beach is unbelievably beautiful, and the area around Swanage, walking around there, is magic for anyone to do. And it should be there for everybody, and it is, and people enjoy visiting there. And you're quite right about the levels of congestion and the pressure on the area because of its beauty. That does mean better transport links are needed. It means park and ride schemes, it means better transport links, it means the Swanage Railway linking up to Wareham is very important as well, and that's a good step forward and a good development. But by making the area a national park, as we're suggesting could well happen, will mean that there'll be more money available for it through the National Parks Fund itself. There will be better controls over planning in the future there, and we will be able to make sure that the national park is there for all people and is managed as well as we possibly can. Because if you think of the history of open spaces and national parks, it was great people like those that trespassed on Kinder Scout in 1932 that opened up the countryside for people to actually get that access, Benny Rothman and his friends. And it was the post-war Labour government that brought about national parks. And it was Chris Smith, when he was Environment Secretary, that brought in the question of the right to roam. The land is there for all of us. It's a common treasury we should all be able to enjoy, and a national park will help everyone to enjoy it within 30 minutes of where they live for the vast majority of the population. Your point about winning in the south, well, I made the point. I give the same message in all parts of the country. If you're on universal credit on a 0 hours contract in a private rented flat and you happen to live in a beautiful place like Swanage and you're in exactly the same condition and you live in Rochdale, you've got a problem with a government that doesn't care about you, a government that is not interested in you. And so our message is there for the whole country, and I am very, very confident of winning here in Southampton, getting Labour MPs in Southampton, 2 Labour MPs in Southampton, and it's my pleasure to work with them on that campaign.
OK, we're fastly running out of time, so we've probably got time for one last round of questions. So I'll go through the people who have already indicated. Heather Stewart from The Guardian.
Hello, you just talked hello. You just talked about those people struggling in whether it's in Swanage or Rochdale, was it? The IFS today, not to mention them again, have described your welfare, your benefits increases, your welfare changes as relatively modest, and they've said they only just reversed half of the cuts implemented since 2015 and less than a quarter of those put in place since 2010. I wonder how, in that context, you justify setting aside £58 billion for those WASPy women, some of whom are very badly off, but some of whom perhaps aren't, and also similarly abolishing tuition fees, which will be for some families who are very badly off and others who are middle class and perhaps might be able to afford it.
OK, thank you, Heather. Dan Bloom from the Mirror.
Hello, Mr. Corbyn. Dan Bloom from the Daily Mirror. Your manifesto today pledges, I believe, 190 trees per minute for 20 years. So could you explain how you'll be able to reassure people that that's realistic and achievable? And quickly, if I may, is it correct, the reports that Labour's shifting its strategy to focus more on winning over Leave voters who might be tempted by the Tories? And do you believe that you've done enough in this campaign so far to persuade those voters to vote for you? Are you happy with how things are?
OK, one more. Sorry. One more. Emily Liddell from Southampton Echo.
Hello, Emily Liddell from the Southern Daily Echo. You spoke earlier about air pollution, and here in Southampton, air pollution is quite a serious matter. But recently, an application has been sent to expand Southampton Airport. Is it right to expand the airport? Can the expansion really be eco-friendly, or are campaigners right in saying that it will increase pollution?
OK. Take those questions first of all. Thanks, Heather, for your question. The WASPy women were grievously treated by the coalition government in 2011. They had worked all their lives, paid taxes and national insurance, and quite reasonably expected to get the pension that they'd paid into all of their lives. The pension age was changed without them being properly informed or appraised of it or able to make any plans or preparation for it. And this specific but limited cohort of women have often gone into deep poverty, debt and stress as a result of it. And I think they've conducted themselves in the most dignified way possible in their campaigning over the past few years. I've met many of the women who've done the campaigning, and I spent Monday morning with a group in Ashfield, or North East Derbyshire rather, discussing with them their situation. And they'd lost, each of them, between £30,000 and £50,000 that they have had to forego in some way, and therefore they're living very difficult lives. Some of them tried to go back to work, went to the job centre and were told maybe they should think about taking an apprenticeship. These are respectable women who've spent a lifetime at work, often in very, very important jobs, in nursing, in education, and many other areas. And I think the treatment of them is disgraceful. And so I'm quite clear that it is a universal benefit. It's a moral duty to pay them, and a Labour government will pay them and honour the debt to them. And if I take the logic of your questions, Heather, thank you for them, and you challenge the issue of tuition fees, which we wish to abolish, I think you're undermining the principles of the universality of public services. Because if you go down that road of saying that some students should get free tuition fees and others not, then you take away the principle of universality. I want every young person that can benefit from it and can get into a university to go there, just as much as I want them to get an apprenticeship or vocational education, which is equally valuable. And I'm quite confident that it's the right thing to do to make education a right, not a privilege, from cradle to grave, and that's exactly what our National Education Service will do. And we will end universal credit, we will end the immoral two-child policy, we will end the rape clause, we will end the wait to go on to benefits, we will end the disgraceful capability for work assessment tests that have caused so much pain to so many people, and we'll run a social security system, not the benefit system they have at the present time. The point about planting of trees, you're quite right. It's not going to be all done by one person. I don't think anyone can manage 190 trees a minute. And I'm glad you've worked it out. I've seen many, many calculations on it, from 1 tree a second to 10 trees a second, and so on and so on. Yes, it is a massive planting programme. I don't apologise for that, because it is a massive issue. And it is going to create good quality jobs. It will mean nurseries have to develop. It will mean that we've got to ensure that we get the biodiversity right in all of the planting that takes place, because the Forestry Commission, established in 1919, was brilliant in its conception, but what it did was created vast forests of softwood fir trees that are actually not very biodiverse, not very sustainable, and they should have become much more mixed. In some ways, the best thing that happened to them was the Great Storm of 1987, because that meant a lot of natural species just generated in place of those trees that have been blown down in that storm. And so let's make sure that it is properly diverse, and it's a huge programme. But let's think about it this way. Students now in school go to college, learn about horticulture, learn about market gardening, learn about food production at a more local level, because we've got to start the concept that we can become more sustainable on food we produce in this country by developing intensive agriculture alongside the biodiversity that you need on all farms. And it's going to be a Labour government that recognises the importance of the countryside, access to the countryside, as well as maintaining the biodiversity of the countryside. Now, you make the point about Southampton Airport. I understand it's a runway extension that's being suggested. Every airport expansion issue that comes before us has got to meet the tests of sustainability, of air pollution, of noise pollution, and of traffic congestion that grows up around it. And Andy MacDonald, as our Transport Secretary, will make sure all of those tests are met before any approvals have been given. And a better rail service will mean much less domestic flying in Britain, and a big improvement in the rail network and the availability and ticket pricing of trains from this country to the near parts of Europe would also mean there would be much less flying. At the moment, rail journeys are very good between London, Paris and Brussels and Amsterdam, but beyond that is incredibly expensive. I'll give you an example. I tested the price of going to Berlin by train. It's about £200 with a series of changes to get there. It's £19 to fly there. Well, that simply cannot be right when the public have invested in the infrastructure of the railways in Germany, Belgium, France and this country and all across. So we do have to improve that rail connectivity and the sustainability of it. And it's those tests that we will bring to all transport developments. And that's why I'm very proud that our manifesto includes bringing our rail network fully into public ownership and expand that rail network so that we do get more sustainable transport for the future. This manifesto, which I urge you to read online, is really good, really interesting, very well thought out, and is a serious, incredible plan. We're not going to bring it about just by the actions of a government. It's what communities do as a whole. Their sense of contribution in tree planting, in planning, in bus development, in industrial development and everything else. It's that consciousness about the sustainability and fragility of our natural world that we bring to the centre of this election campaign. And I'm very proud that we've done that today here in Southampton. And I say thank you all for coming here today and taking part in this discussion.